just a short introduction. Actually, this is fourth corporate governance forum, which I'm taking part in, really, in Mongolia. I'm now based in Philippines, but I used to be based in Mongolia, and we actually had a corporate governance program here running for several years. And one thing good actually to notice, when we first started this initiative on corporate governance forums, this was more just introduction into a corporate governance concept, actually. And it's, I mean, one of the good developments is what we're actually now diving into more of subtopics, really, specifics of corporate governance, and how basically these topics, I mean, can be improved and implemented in Mongolia. I mean, I know it will probably take some while before my, I mean, you can see the slides, but then I was assured that you should get the slides after the conference. Basically, during my limited time, I just want to talk about the global trends really in governance and global trends in corporate reporting specifically. Firstly, what's the purpose really of having transparency and disclosure? As has been pointed out by Tune, it's not only for compliance really. This is only one of the reasons why companies actually implement good practices on transparency and disclosure. Really, investors and generally stakeholders want to have reliable information about the company to make decisions on an informed basis. The question then comes, what should be disclosed? What information should be disclosed to public? What information should be disclosed to shareholders? And you have certain requirements by regulatory authorities. It can be listing rules, it can be company laws, which provide certain minimum information. But really, this is the minimalistic approach. And in corporate governance and in disclosure, there is more to that. There is also market factors, market discipline, which drives the disclosure. In particular, if companies disclose more, their shares are can be more highly priced. They can get easier access to financing because greater disclosure builds trust in companies. Builds trust in the way we perform, builds trust in how actually also with internal processes. Sorry. Also, there is a certain self-discipline. There is also a certain self-discipline. Basically internal policy and procedures, as understanding basically what the benefits are. Companies, again, go beyond the minimum requirements, they state their commitment, really, and actually provide the basics of their corporate reporting to the external world. But this concept has been known for quite a long time, the concept of disclosure in general. However, the scope of disclosure shifted. If you look at OECD principles, and actually there have been new principles on corporate governance released just in September of 2015 by in Istanbul. The requirements on disclosure have been slightly modified. The focus before was on disclosure of financial information and certain non-financial data. Okay, I think we're now going to have more slides. Have PowerPoint on. Yeah, and the focus of disclosure shifted. Before it was mostly about disclosing certain elements, and these elements actually were stated quite specifically. Financial reports, audit opinions have to be disclosed, and maybe also some qualitative factors relating to governance, relating to the strategic objectives. However, focus now is more on materiality of information. Companies should disclose the material information. And material information goes beyond just mere financial statements. Material information refers to any information which can affect shareholders upon making decisions. Basically, and basically materiality is really an entity-specific concept based on nature of a business, based on the also on magnitude of a company. And basically, when we talk about materiality, material information, it's focused a lot on non-financial items. Okay, here you can already see some slides. Just to see how actual companies are working and what are the leading practices on disclosure of such non-material information. There was actually we'll have two surveys. Compared. One survey from one leading companies, and then we actually have a survey from Mongolia, which we did about a couple of years ago. This is basically a survey which PwC did in 2013. A survey of FTC, basically 100 companies, by 100 largest companies by market capitalization. And basically, one of the purpose was to see how actual companies report on items beyond the financial performance. Actually, the results are quite good when you look at it. When you look at it, companies have improved in terms of communications of their business models, in terms of communications of basically material information which goes beyond financial figures. 99 companies disclosed strategic priorities. 94% of companies actually reported business models. External 88% of companies actually discussed future market trends. 94% of companies explained the nature and mitigations of risks. Sorry, I'm reading because I think some people cannot see the screen. And actually 96% of companies identified KPIs for them. 88% of companies report on drivers of financial performance. So these are quite good results. Again, when you look from point of view of leading practices, there was some room for improvement. Certain items were disclosed, but sometimes some details were omitted, so it gave sometimes a superficial kind of picture about what's going on. For example, 96 companies identified KPIs, but only 39% identified actual targets for those KPIs. Thank you. 94% actually included business model, but it was only in 11% of those companies actually there were clear links between business model and various aspects of the report. So there is still room for improvement at even at largest companies, but still the situation is improving. Coming to Mongolia, as Twin has mentioned, we have had the Mongolian Corporate Governance Scorecard report released in 2013, actually, the same date when the same year when the FTC report was released as well. And the results were a bit disappointing or expected. This was the first time when we did these initiatives in Mongolia. Probably many of you have heard or participated in events following this publication. Overall rating was 27.5% for all corporate governance practices, but however, disclosure and transparency was quite weak in companies. On average, companies rated 18%. And when compared with average rating for all corporate governance, that kind of showed what there was a need for great improvement in these particular areas. And some of the issues which were identified during that, had to do with the following. Really, many companies did not disclose annual reports. Actually, they were not annual reports; they were financial statements. There were issues with quality of those financial statements. There was an issue with they were not sometimes properly audited. Just an example. Many of these annual reports which we looked at, and we looked at 20 largest companies. Listed on Mongolian Stock Exchange. So we look at companies which ideally have more resources and knowledge when smaller compared with smaller companies. And the identities of auditors sometimes were not disclosed. The standards which were basically used for auditing these financial statements were not disclosed. The quality of and content of company website, basically because this is how most of the information is released. It's quite weak. Most of the information was not there. The companies didn't have sometimes basically their disclosure policy, which would state what information would be disclosed and under which conditions. And also, I mean, as you mentioned, the government, it's introduced rules on related party disclosures. Sometimes the companies in practice did not implement actually the rules on the related party disclosures. We didn't see it. We didn't see sometimes whether the companies had internal related party policies, and the disclosure of transactions, I mean, at least significant transactions. Nobody expects, I mean, all transactions to be released was quite weak. Just considering that, I would just want to finish with some trends which currently exist. Again, the focus is now on disclosure of non-financial, basically, information. And why is that? Well, when you think about financial performance, right? Disclosure of financial reports. This is basically disclosure of what happened in the past. And sometimes that's not that useful in the investors, especially in times of global financial crisis and all the other turbulence which is currently happening. Investors want to see information which is more forward-looking, which basically ensures, which helps to understand them, help investors understand the sustainability and long-term goals of the companies. Also, there has been growing academic study, we focus primarily on financial performance, really led to short-term decision-making and excessive risk-taking by companies, because they were not really thinking, long-term. What are some of the contents, really? What are some of the issues which are currently being discussed and sometimes even required? And so this is actually not only academic theory, it's already been in practice in certain countries. There is a requirement for greater, for example, disclosure of business models, business environment, and drivers of value creation or destructions. For example, under these segments of reporting, companies will be required to disclose how it generates, preserves, or captures value over long term, which is, which is as noted on the previous slides, actually, many companies already do that. There is a requirement to disclose the strategy and its relationship to short, middle, and long-term company performance. There is a greater requirement for disclosure of strategy and performance, in particular, this performance of key performance indicators, which are basically explicitly identified, including any limitations on the measure and assumptions behind it, and use which sometimes generally accepted measures what are widely used in particular industry. There is also greater requirement on reporting of risk and risks facing a company, because the company might have its objectives, it might have its strategy, but the risks which may prevent or achievement of strategy are also important. So the extent of corporate reporting is now broader. There are more other concepts which currently exist, which is also called the integrated reporting. There are different initiatives which actually provide the frameworks for such reporting. And some of this is already made mandatory in many countries. For example, non-financial disclosure has been mandated recently by there's EU directive, for example, adopted in 2014, which provides for a content and of disclosure of non-financial information. And this has been also implemented at national levels, and some countries, including UK, we have made changes in the Companies Act in 2013. Similar requirements have been made in Singapore, Denmark, Australia, but also in emerging markets such as Brazil, Chile, Mexico. But the question is it just kind of academic thinking, or is there some really good business case behind having stronger and more integrated reporting? Various bodies, including United Nations and World Business Council for Business Development, actually have been focusing on this link between economic growth, sustainability, and also focusing on non-financial strategies and activities of a companies. And they've been a body of survey and academic evidence from their part, which actually showed what companies which provide better links between strategy, targets, and performance, we performed on 90% better, for example, than our companies. So it's not only for external users, it's also for internal users. when companies have better way of reporting, they see areas where you can create value really more explicitly compared with companies which focus on traditional way of reporting information. This being said, I think recurrent initiatives which we'll be announcing today on Best Annual Award is a good way to start for companies. I think, again, in Mongolia, like in many countries, you have a lot of regulations, and sometimes compliance with this regulation is quite complex. But again, on disclosure, focus shouldn't be only on compliance. Focus should be on benefits which better disclosure can bring to companies. In form of greater recognition among investors, trust to the company, and also because this whole process helps to build the internal understanding and internal efficiency better. Thank you.